Well, staying on RED for just a second longer, some of the most vocal critics of RED have, of course, been indigenous communities and local community forest groups. I think there's a fear that those groups may not benefit financially from these new capital flows. Could we talk a bit more about that?
Yes, indeed. So there are a couple of issues, or several. One of them you mentioned. So the indigenous groups who've been looking after these forests for thousands of years, and in some countries the reason the forests are still there is because of the actions of the indigenous communities. Now, you look at a map of Brazil, for example, the big chunks of forest that are in the zone of deforestation in that area from Pará around to Rondônia, a lot of the areas that remain are the indigenous reserves, and you can see a very straight read across between who's got the land and where the forest is still left, and this is down to their different perspective on life and their worldview, and that's why the forest is still there. And so they would have a very strong argument to say, actually, we're the people who are the custodians, are we going to see any of the money? And you know, the way this could work, it could be a global commodity market in carbon that's created, and national governments are creaming off all of the money, and people trading carbon in Western financial markets like London, New York, could be the principal beneficiaries of this. And that isn't fair, and that's why a lot of indigenous communities have been expressing concerns about the extent to which carbon markets may or may not work for them. That's not to say that carbon markets won't work, it's just to express a concern that they have, which many people would see the sense of. So if that can be solved, that would be one enormous step forward. Another issue is to do with loss of control over the fate of the forests, and you know, if a carbon market is created, then it could easily be that national governments would have incentives to tell local people what to do in order to keep the carbon so that they can get the money, and that would lead to a loss of control over the land. There may also be temptations to block indigenous groups gaining legal title over their land, because the carbon rights then would be with them rather than with the national government. So indigenous communities can foresee all sorts of difficulties here, and they do have to be sorted out, because if the deal isn't fair and equitable and it isn't reflecting the needs of everybody, then there's going to be dissatisfaction and it may not work longer term. So we do have to have all of these discussions, and that's why the emergency package, we hope, can make an immediate contribution whilst all these very important issues are being sorted out. It will take probably a little while to do that. And the other concern of many people on the ground in the developing countries, and they can see the effects of climate change already, is that they're concerned if the carbon market is created involving forest carbon credits in some form, that it may be a way of letting some of the industrialised countries off of the hook of doing emissions reductions at home themselves. For example, if a German power utility wanted to build a coal-fired power station, it might be able to buy carbon forest credits from Brazil or Guatemala or somewhere, and then justify the release of that carbon.
Carbon offsetting, basically.
Carbon offsetting, exactly, through the use of carbon credits generated for the forestry sector.
Yep.
So many people in developing countries are concerned about that too. So as you can see, it's a horrendously complicated discussion, and there's lots of people with extremely good motives trying to sort this out, and we wish them every good fortune in being able to navigate all of this complexity. But again, you know, the message from the Prince's Rainforest Project is that this will take a little time, most likely, and so that's why we're arguing for emergency money to be made available immediately through a new financing mechanism which we've laid out in our proposals, which are available at our website. Okay. And rainforestsos.org is the place to look, and you can find the technical details there. But effectively a way of raising money now to spend immediately to stop deforestation is the approach we've taken.